Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen when we least expect them, when innocence meets cruelty, when silence breaks into action, and when strangers become heroes in the span of 30 minutes. This is not just another story about bullying or standing up for others. This is about the raw power of human compassion that can transform lives forever. What you're about to read happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at Lincoln High School in Michigan. It involves two girls who had never spoken to each other before that day. One was 17-year-old Emma Rodriguez, who had been using a wheelchair since a car accident left her paralyzed from the waist down 2 years earlier. The other was 16-year-old Zara Williams, known throughout the school as someone who kept to herself and never got involved in drama. Neither of them knew that this single afternoon would become the defining moment of their teenage years. Neither knew that 30 minutes could change everything. And neither knew that sometimes justice comes not from adults or authorities, but from the most unexpected places. This is their story. A story that spread through their school, their community, and eventually across the internet, touching millions of hearts. A story that proves sometimes the quiet ones are just waiting for the right moment to roar. Emma Rodriguez had always been the type of person who found joy in small things. Before the accident, she was the girl who volunteered at animal shelters on weekends, who helped elderly neighbors carry their groceries, and who never missed a chance to make someone smile. The car accident on Interstate 94 2 years ago had taken away her ability to walk, but it hadn't taken away her spirit. At 17, Emma had learned to navigate Lincoln High School's hallways with the same determination she once used to climb the rope in gym class. Her wheelchair wasn't just a mobility device to her, it was her chariot. She had decorated it with small sunflower stickers and a tiny bell that chimed softly as she moved through the corridors. Students and teachers had grown accustomed to that gentle sound, and many associated it with Emma's warm presence. The morning of Tuesday, October 15th, started like any other day for Emma. She woke up at 6:30, transferred herself from her bed to a wheelchair with practiced ease, and went through her morning routine. Her mother, Maria Rodriguez, always insisted on making her favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese and toast cut into triangles, just the way Emma liked them as a child. "Remember, Mija, you have that history presentation today," her mother reminded her while packing Emma's lunch. Maria was a small woman with kind eyes who had dedicated the past 2 years to making sure Emma had everything she needed to succeed. She had learned about wheelchair accessibility, had advocated with the school district for better ramps, and had become Emma's fiercest supporter. Emma smiled as she grabbed her backpack, carefully organized with color-coded folders for each subject. "I've been practicing all week, Mom. I think Mr. Rees Patterson will be impressed with my research on the civil rights movement." The drive to school was peaceful. Emma loved watching the neighborhood wake up, seeing joggers starting their morning runs, and observing how the autumn leaves painted the streets in shades of gold and red. Her mother's car was equipped with a wheelchair lift, installed 6 months after the accident, when they realized Emma's recovery was going to be permanent. Arriving at Lincoln High School, Emma felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that came with each new day. The school had been built in the 1960s, and despite recent renovations to improve accessibility, navigating it still required planning and patience. Emma had memorized every ramp, every accessible door, and every route that would get her to her classes on time. Her first class was advanced biology with Mrs. Chen, where she sat next to her lab partner Marcus, a quiet boy who appreciated Emma's meticulous note-taking and positive attitude. They were working on a project about cellular regeneration, and Emma had thrown herself into the research with characteristic enthusiasm. She found science fascinating, especially topics related to medical advancement and recovery. "Did you see the article I sent you about spinal cord research?" Marcus asked as they prepared their microscope slides. "They're making incredible progress with stem cell therapy." Emma nodded, adjusting her wheelchair to get closer to the lab table. "I read it 3 times. It's amazing what they're discovering. Even if it doesn't help me directly, knowing that future patients might have different options gives me hope." During lunch, Emma usually sat with a small group of friends near the large windows in the cafeteria. Today, she was joined by Sarah, a girl from her art class who shared Emma's love of painting, and David, who was president of the photography club and had been documenting the school's accessibility improvements for a project.
"I'm thinking about applying to college early admission," Emma announced, unwrapping her sandwich.
"I want to study biomedical engineering. Maybe I can help design better equipment for people with disabilities." Sarah smiled. "That's perfect for you, Emma. You always find ways to turn challenges into opportunities." After lunch, Emma made her way to Mr. Patterson's history class where she was scheduled to give her presentation. The classroom was on the 2nd floor, accessible via a service elevator that Emma had learned to operate with practiced efficiency. She always gave herself extra time for these transitions, knowing that mechanical delays were part of her daily reality. Mr. Patterson was a middle-aged teacher who had been particularly supportive since Emma's return to school. He had worked with her to ensure she could participate fully in all classroom activities, including field trips and special events. Today, he greeted her with an encouraging smile. "Ready for your presentation, Emma?" he asked, helping her position her wheelchair at the front of the classroom. Emma nodded, feeling confident about her research. She had chosen to focus on the disability rights movement, drawing parallels between the civil rights movement and the ongoing fight for accessibility and inclusion. Her presentation included personal anecdotes about her own experiences, as well as historical facts about legislation like the Americans with Disabilities Act. As her classmates filed in, Emma felt the familiar pre-presentation butterflies, but she was ready. She had practiced in front of a mirror at home, had timed her delivery, and had prepared engaging visual aids. This was her moment to shine. To show her peers that her wheelchair didn't define her limitations, it highlighted her determination. The presentation went smoothly. Emma spoke with passion about barrier-free design, about the importance of inclusion in education, and about the heroes who had fought for disability rights throughout American history. Her classmates listened attentively, and several asked thoughtful questions afterward. Mr. Patterson beamed with pride, and Emma felt a warm sense of accomplishment. As the school day was winding down, Emma had one final class, study hall, which she usually used to work on homework or catch up on reading. The classroom was located near the main entrance of the school, in an area that was well lit and easily accessible. Emma enjoyed this peaceful time to organize her thoughts and prepare for the next day. She was working on math problems when she noticed the time, 3:45. School officially ended at 3:50, and Emma liked to wait until the initial rush of students had cleared before making her way to the pickup area where her mother would be waiting. This routine helped her avoid the crowded hallways and gave her time to pack up her materials carefully. At 3:55, Emma closed her textbook and began organizing her backpack. She transferred her notebooks into her lap, zipped up her pencil case, and made sure her water bottle was secure in the side pocket of her wheelchair. These small preparations had become second nature, but they required attention to detail to ensure nothing fell or got forgotten. As she wheeled toward the classroom door, Emma felt the quiet satisfaction that came with completing another successful day at school. Her presentation had gone well. She had understood the biology lesson, and she had made plans with Sarah to work on their art project over the weekend. These were the moments that reminded her why she had fought so hard to return to normal life after the accident. The hallway was mostly empty now, with just a few students lingering at their lockers or talking with teachers. Emma's route to the main entrance took her past the gymnasium, through the central corridor, and around a corner that led to the school's front doors. She knew this path by heart, having traveled it hundreds of times over the past 2 years. As she approached the corner near the trophy cases, Emma could hear voices coming from around the bend. At first, she didn't pay much attention, assuming it was just students having a conversation. But as she got closer, something in the tone made her pause. The voices sounded aggressive, mocking, and deliberately cruel. Emma slowed down, uncertain whether she should continue forward or find an alternative route. She wasn't naturally confrontational, and her experiences had taught her to be cautious about potentially difficult situations. But curiosity and concern overrode her caution, and she decided to quietly approach the corner to see what was happening. What she saw when she peered around the corner would stay with her forever. 3 students, 2 boys and a girl, were standing in a semicircle around someone Emma couldn't quite see. Their body language was intimidating, their voices were raised, and there was something deliberately menacing about their posture. Emma's heart began to race as she realized she was witnessing a bullying situation. She backed her wheelchair away from the corner, her mind racing with uncertainty. Every instinct told her to find a teacher or call for help, but she also knew that by the time she located an adult, whatever was happening might escalate or move to a different location. Emma had never been in a situation like this before, and she felt paralyzed by indecision. Taking a deep breath, Emma made a choice that would define the next 30 minutes of her life. She quietly positioned her wheelchair so she could observe the situation more clearly, hoping to understand what was happening and figure out how to help. What she saw broke her heart and ignited a fire of indignation she didn't know she possessed. The target of the bully's attention was a girl Emma recognized, but had never spoken to. Her name was Zara Williams, and she was sitting on the floor near her locker, surrounded by scattered books and papers. Her backpack had been emptied, her lunch scattered across the hallway, and there were tears in her eyes that she was trying desperately to hide. Emma watched in horror as the situation unfolded, knowing that in just a few moments everything would change for both of them. Zara Williams had always been the type of person who preferred shadows to spotlights. At 16, she had mastered the art of invisibility, moving through Lincoln High School's hallways like a ghost, unnoticed and unbothered. This wasn't because she lacked confidence or intelligence. Quite the opposite. Zara was brilliant, perceptive, and possessed an inner strength that most people never got the chance to witness. She lived with her grandmother, Dorothy Williams, in a small apartment on the east side of town. Dorothy was a retired teacher who had raised Zara since she was 8 years old, after her parents died in a house fire. The tragedy had shaped Zara in ways that weren't immediately visible. She had learned to be self-reliant, to trust cautiously, and to observe the world with the keen awareness of someone who had experienced loss too early. Zara's appearance often made her a target for assumptions and prejudice. She was tall for her age, with natural hair that she wore in protective styles, and she had developed early, which drew unwanted attention from some students. More significantly, she dressed differently from many of her peers. While other students wore name-brand clothes and latest fashions, Zara's wardrobe consisted of thrift store finds and hand-me-downs, carefully maintained but clearly not expensive. Her grandmother worked 2 part-time jobs to support them, one as a home health aide and another cleaning offices at night. Dorothy had sacrificed her retirement to give Zara stability and opportunity, and Zara was acutely aware of this sacrifice. She never complained about their financial situation, never asked for things they couldn't afford, and had learned to find pride in making the most of what they had. At school, Zara was an excellent student who turned in perfect assignments, participated thoughtfully in class discussions, and maintained a GPA that would qualify her for academic scholarships. Teachers respected her, but she rarely formed close relationships with them. She had learned that adults often made promises they couldn't keep, and she preferred to depend on herself rather than risk disappointment. Her social life was minimal by choice. Zara had acquaintances but no close friends. She ate lunch alone, usually in the library where she could read or work on homework. She participated in class when required, but never volunteered for group projects or social activities. This isolation wasn't born from shyness, but from a carefully constructed protective barrier. The truth was that Zara had tried to fit in during her freshman year. She had joined the chess club, had attempted to make friends in her advanced classes, and had even auditioned for the school play. Each attempt had resulted in subtle rejections, microaggressions, or situations that reminded her she was different from her peers. Eventually, she had decided that solitude was safer than repeated disappointment. What most people didn't know about Zara was that she was incredibly observant. From her position on the periphery of social groups, she saw things that others missed. She noticed when students were struggling with personal problems, when teachers were having bad days, and when social dynamics shifted in ways that predicted trouble. This awareness had become both a gift and a burden. On the morning of October the 15th, Zara woke up in the small bedroom she shared with her grandmother's sewing machine and exercise bike. Their apartment was cramped but clean, filled with plants that Dorothy tended carefully, and photographs from better times. Zara's corner contained a desk made from a door and 2 filing cabinets, where she did her homework and read late into the night. Her morning routine was efficient and quiet. She showered quickly to conserve hot water, dressed in a clean sweater and jeans that she had mended herself, and ate a breakfast of toast and instant coffee while reviewing her notes for the day's classes. Dorothy had already left for her morning job, leaving a cheerful note reminding Zara to take her lunch money and wishing her a good day. The walk to school took Zara 25 minutes, which she used as thinking time. She listened to podcasts about science and history on earbuds she had found at a garage sale, expanding her knowledge beyond what was offered in her classes. This daily walk was one of her favorite parts of the day, a time when she could be alone with her thoughts without feeling lonely. Arriving at Lincoln High School, Zara navigated the morning chaos with practiced skill. She knew which hallways were less crowded, which bathrooms were cleanest, and which routes would get her to class without unnecessary social interaction. Her locker was located in a relatively quiet section of the building, which suited her perfectly. Her first class was advanced chemistry with Dr. Rodriguez, where Zara consistently earned the highest grades despite never having a lab partner. She preferred working alone, and Dr. Rodriguez had learned to respect this preference while ensuring Zara still met all collaborative learning objectives. Today they were studying molecular bonds, and Zara found herself fascinated by the way different elements combined to create entirely new properties. During second period English literature with Mrs. Thompson, Zara participated in a discussion about symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird. She had strong opinions about the book's treatment of race and justice, but she expressed them carefully, knowing that her perspective sometimes made other students uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson appreciated Zara's insights, often building on her comments to guide the class toward deeper understanding. Lunch was Zara's most challenging time of day. The cafeteria was loud, crowded, and full of social landmines she preferred to avoid. She usually bought a sandwich and found a quiet corner in the library, where she could eat while reading or working on assignments. The librarian, Miss Garcia, had noticed Zara's daily presence and had begun recommending books that matched her interests in science and social justice. Today, however, the library was closed for maintenance, forcing Zara to find an alternative lunch spot. She decided to eat outside, despite the October chill, sitting on a bench near the school's memorial garden, where few students ventured. The solitude was worth the cold, and she used the time to review her notes for afternoon classes. Her third period was Advanced Placement History with Mr. Juvial Patterson, the same class where Emma Rodriguez was scheduled to give her presentation. Zara arrived early, as was her habit, and chose a seat in the back corner where she could observe without being observed. She had noticed Emma around school and had been quietly impressed by her resilience and positive attitude, though they had never spoken. When Emma began her presentation about the disability rights movement, Zara found herself genuinely engaged. Emma's research was thorough, her delivery was confident, and her personal perspective added authenticity to the historical facts. Zara appreciated Emma's courage in sharing her own experiences and noticed how respectfully the other students listened. It was one of the few times Zara had seen her classmates demonstrate genuine maturity and empathy. After the presentation, Zara lingered briefly, considering whether to approach Emma with a compliment about her work, but her natural caution overrode the impulse, and she packed up her materials and headed to her next class without speaking. This was typical for Zara. She often had generous thoughts about her peers but rarely acted on them. Her final class of the day was Study Hall, which Zara used productively to complete assignments and prepare for upcoming tests. She was working on calculus problems when she noticed the time and began packing up her belongings. Unlike many students who rushed to leave as soon as the bell rang, Zara preferred to take her time and avoid the crowded hallways. At 3:55, Zara made her way to her locker to collect the books she needed for evening homework. Her locker was located near the gymnasium, in a section of the building that emptied quickly after school hours. She enjoyed this quiet time, when the building felt peaceful and she didn't have to navigate around groups of socializing students. As she organized her backpack, Zara heard footsteps approaching from around the corner. At first, she didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another student retrieving something from their locker. But as the voices got closer, she recognized them, and her stomach dropped with a familiar dread. The voices belonged to 3 students who had made Zara's life difficult since the beginning of the school year. There was Brad Morrison, a football player, who considered himself clever but was actually just cruel. Next to him was his girlfriend Chelsea Matthews, who participated in bullying behavior to maintain her social status. The third was Jake Coleman, who followed Brad's lead in most situations and seemed to enjoy having someone to look down on. These 3 had discovered early in the semester that Zara was an easy target. She didn't fight back, didn't report them to teachers, and didn't have friends who might defend her. They had started with small things, bumping into her in hallways, making comments about her clothes, or spreading rumors about her family situation. Recently, their behavior had escalated, and Zara had begun to dread encountering them. Today, she realized with sinking heart, she was trapped. Her locker was positioned in such a way that she couldn't easily retreat without passing directly by them. She considered her options quickly, hoping to grab her necessary books and leave before they noticed her. But as she reached for her calculus textbook, she heard Brad's voice calling her name in the mocking tone she had come to hate. "Well, well, well, if it isn't our favorite charity case," Brad said, his voice echoing in the empty hallway. "Working late today, Zara? Or are you just hiding out here because you don't have anywhere else to go?" Zara kept her eyes focused on her locker, hoping that if she ignored them, they might lose interest and move on. She had learned that engaging with bullies often made situations worse, and she preferred to endure their comments rather than escalate the confrontation. Her hands were steady as she continued organizing her books, but her heart was racing. Chelsea laughed, a sound that was more cruel than amused. "Look at her, trying to pretend we're not here. That's so typical. She thinks she's too good to talk to us, but look at those clothes." "Where did you get that sweater, Zara? The garbage dump." Jake joined in, emboldened by his friend's laughter.
I bet she's embarrassed because everyone knows she lives in that tiny apartment with her old grandmother.
"My mum told me they're on food stamps." "That's so sad." Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. She had worked hard to keep her family's financial struggles private, And the fact that these students were making fun of her grandmother, who had sacrificed so much for her, was particularly painful. Still, she maintained her silence, knowing that reacting would only give them more ammunition. But today, Brad seemed determined to get a response. He moved closer to Zara's locker, deliberately invading her personal space. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he said, his tone becoming more aggressive. "Don't you think it's rude to ignore people when they're trying to be friendly?" When Zara still didn't respond, Brad reached out and knocked her backpack out of her hands. Books and papers scattered across the floor, and her calculator, a gift from her grandmother that had cost Dorothy a significant portion of her paycheck, skittered across the linoleum and cracked against the wall. This was the moment when Zara's carefully constructed composure began to crack. She dropped to her knees to gather her scattered belongings, trying to check whether her calculator was damaged while fighting back tears of frustration and anger. The three bullies stood over her, their shadows making the task more difficult. "Oops," Brad said with false innocence. "That was an accident. You should really be more careful with your things, especially since I bet you can't afford to replace them." As Zara knelt on the floor, surrounded by her scattered possessions and facing the cruel laughter of her tormentors, she had no idea that someone was watching from around the corner. She had no idea that Emma Rodriguez had witnessed the entire encounter and was making a decision that would change both of their lives forever. The next few minutes would transform two quiet observers into something neither of them had ever expected to become. Emma Rodriguez had witnessed many things in her 17 years, but nothing had prepared her for the surge of righteous anger that flooded through her as she watched Zara's books scatter across the hallway floor. From her hidden position around the corner, she could see everything clearly. The deliberate cruelty of Brad knocking down the backpack, the satisfied smirks on Chelsea and Jake's faces, and most heartbreakingly, the way Zara tried to maintain her dignity while kneeling among her scattered belongings. For a moment, Emma was frozen by the intensity of her own reaction. She had never been in a physical confrontation before, had never even raised her voice in anger at school. Her natural inclination was to find a teacher, to report the incident through proper channels, to handle the situation the way adults always told students to handle bullying. But something about the calculated cruelty of what she was witnessing made those options feel inadequate. As she watched Zara carefully examining her cracked calculator, Emma was transported back to her own darkest moments after the accident. She remembered the feeling of powerlessness, the way some people looked at her with pity or discomfort, and the crushing weight of being different in a world that often punished difference. The parallel wasn't exact, but the emotional core was the same. Someone was being targeted for things beyond their control, and the attackers were enjoying their power over someone they perceived as vulnerable. Emma's hands tightened on her wheelchair's armrests as Brad continued his verbal assault. "You know what your problem is, Zara?" he said, circling around her like a predator. "You act like you're better than everyone else, but you're nobody. Your parents are dead, your grandmother works 2 jobs just to keep you fed, and you dress like you shop at yard sales. Which you probably do." The mention of Zara's deceased parents crossed a line that Emma couldn't tolerate. She had lost the use of her legs, but she still had loving parents who supported her every day. The thought of losing them, and then being mocked for that loss, ignited something fierce and protective inside her. Before she could second-guess herself, Emma was moving. She wheeled around the corner with more speed than she usually used in school hallways, her chair's small bell chiming rapidly with the acceleration. The sound caught the attention of all 4 students, and Brad paused mid-sentence as Emma came into view. For a split second, the hallway was silent, except for the quiet hum of Emma's wheelchair motor. Emma positioned herself directly between the bullies and Zara, her chair angled in a way that created a physical barrier. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "That's enough," she said, looking directly at Brad. "Leave her alone." Brad's initial surprise quickly shifted to amusement. "Well, look what we have here," he said, glancing at Chelsea and Jake for support. "The Crip wants to play hero. This is perfect. Now we have 2 charity cases in one place." Emma felt the familiar sting of the slur, but she had developed thick skin about disability-related insults over the past 2 years. What she couldn't tolerate was seeing someone else suffer when she had the power to intervene. "I said leave her alone," she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "Find something better to do with your time." Chelsea stepped forward, apparently emboldened by having a new target. "Or what?" she asked with a sneer. "What are you going to do about it, Wheels? Chase us down." The comment was designed to highlight Emma's physical limitations, to make her feel powerless and retreat. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Emma had spent 2 years learning to adapt, to find new sources of strength, and to refuse to be defined by what she couldn't do. She wasn't going to let these bullies make Zara feel as small as they were trying to make her feel. I'm going to record everything you're doing and send it to Principal Martinez, Coach Thompson, and your parents, Emma said, pulling out her smartphone with practiced efficiency. I know who all of you are, and I know this isn't the first time you've done this, but it's going to be the last time. The threat of documentation and consequences seemed to give Brad pause, but only briefly. You think anyone's going to believe you over us? He asked, though his confidence seemed slightly shaken. We were just having a conversation. It's not our fault if she's too sensitive to handle a little joking around. Emma began recording, making sure to capture all 3 faces clearly. Is that what this looks like to you? Joking around? She gestured toward Zara, who was still kneeling on the floor, surrounded by her scattered possessions. Does she look like she's enjoying your jokes? For the first time since the encounter began, Zara looked up. Her eyes met Emma's, and Emma saw a mixture of gratitude and surprise that made her more determined than ever to stand her ground. Zara had been handling the situation alone, probably handling situations like this for much longer than today, and Emma was not going to let it continue. Jake, apparently sensing that the dynamic was shifting, tried to de-escalate. Come on guys, this is getting stupid. Let's just go. But Brad wasn't ready to back down, especially not in front of 2 girls he saw as beneath him socially. I don't think so, Brad said, taking a step closer to Emma's wheelchair. I think our friend here needs to learn to mind her own business. Just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you get to act like you're in charge of everyone. This was the moment when Emma's 2 years of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and adaptive sports training paid off in an unexpected way. She had developed upper body strength that most 17-year-olds didn't possess. Her hands and arms had become powerful tools of independence, and her wheelchair, rather than being a symbol of limitation, had become an extension of her determination. When Brad reached toward her phone, clearly intending to knock it out of her hands or grab it away, Emma was ready. She pulled her phone back protectively while simultaneously using her other hand to grab the pushrim of her wheel and spin her chair in a quick half circle that knocked Brad off balance. He stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, but the unexpected maneuver had shifted the power dynamic entirely. Don't touch me, Emma said firmly, her phone still recording. And don't touch her either. This stops now. The commotion had attracted attention from other parts of the building. Emma could hear footsteps approaching from the direction of the main office, and she realized that her earlier concern about finding an adult was about to be resolved. But rather than feeling relieved, she felt a new sense of urgency. She wanted to make sure Zara was okay before the situation became complicated by official intervention. She turned her wheelchair towards Zara, who was slowly getting to her feet while clutching her damaged calculator. Are you hurt? Emma asked, her voice gentler now but still carrying the authority she had discovered in herself. Zara shook her head, but Emma could see unshed tears in her eyes.
My calculator, Zara said quietly, holding up the cracked device. My grandmother saved for months to buy this for me.
The simple statement broke Emma's heart and renewed her anger simultaneously.
These bullies had damaged something that represented love and sacrifice, and they had done it carelessly, as if Zara's possessions and feelings didn't matter. Emma made a mental note to find out how to replace the calculator, but first, she needed to make sure Zara felt supported and protected. We'll figure out the calculator, Emma said. Right now, I want to make sure they understand that this behavior isn't acceptable. The footsteps Emma had heard were getting closer, and she could now see Mr. Raikeka, Patterson, her history teacher, approaching with a concerned expression. Behind him was Ms. Garcia, the librarian, who must have been alerted by the noise. Emma felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that adult authority was arriving to handle the situation properly, but disappointment that her moment of taking charge was about to end. Brad, Chelsea, and Jake had apparently heard the approaching adults as well, and their demeanor shifted quickly from aggressive to innocent. We were just talking, Chelsea said in a voice that was suddenly sweet and reasonable. There's been a misunderstanding. Patterson as he approached. There's no misunderstanding, she said clearly. I have everything recorded on my phone. These 3 students were bullying Zara, they knocked her backpack down deliberately, and they broke her calculator. They also used slurs about my disability when I tried to intervene. Patterson's expression grew serious as he took in the scene. Zara's scattered books, her cracked calculator, and the positioning of the students told a story that didn't match Chelsea's claim of innocent conversation. Ms. Garcia immediately went to help Zara gather her remaining belongings, speaking to her in quiet, reassuring tones. "I think we need to continue this conversation in my classroom, Mr. Boy," Patterson said, his teacher voice carrying the authority that Emma's student voice had been building toward. "All of you, please gather your things and follow me."
As the group prepared to move, Emma caught Zara's eye again.
This time, instead of gratitude mixed with surprise, she saw something new in Zara's expression. It was recognition, the acknowledgement that passes between people who have shared a significant moment. Emma realized that regardless of what happened next with administrators and consequences, something fundamental had changed between them. The 30 minutes that had started with Emma witnessing an injustice were about to transform into something much larger. As they all headed toward Mr. Patterson's classroom, Emma had no way of knowing that her decision to intervene would set in motion events that would reshape the social dynamics of Lincoln High School and create a friendship that would last long beyond their graduation day. What she did know was that she had discovered something about herself that she hadn't known existed. She had found her voice, her power, and her willingness to use both when someone needed protection. And judging by the way Zara had looked at her, she suspected that Zara had discovered something about herself too. The real story was just beginning. The walk to Mr. Patterson's classroom felt like a march toward justice for Emma, but she could sense the tension radiating from everyone around her. Brad, Chelsea, and Jake had fallen into defensive formation, whispering among themselves and clearly strategizing their explanation for what had happened. Zara walked quietly beside Emma's wheelchair, still clutching her broken calculator, and occasionally glancing at Emma with an expression that mixed gratitude with disbelief. Mr. Patterson's classroom was spacious and well lit, with motivational posters about historical figures who had fought for justice and equality. Emma found it grimly appropriate that their confrontation about bullying was taking place, surrounded by images of people like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Cesar Chavez. She wondered if the irony was lost on Brad and his friends. "Please take seats," Mr. Patterson said, gesturing toward the arranged desks. His tone was professional but serious, the voice of someone who had dealt with student conflicts many times before, but still took each situation seriously. Emma positioned her wheelchair in the circle of desks, and Zara chose the seat closest to her. Miss Garcia had followed them to the classroom and took a position near the door, apparently to ensure that the conversation remained supervised and that no one could leave without permission. Her presence was calming to Emma, who had always appreciated the librarian's quiet wisdom and supportive nature. Patterson settled behind his desk and looked at each student carefully before speaking. "I want to hear from everyone about what happened in the hallway. But before we start, I want to make sure everyone understands that this is a serious conversation. Bullying is not tolerated at Lincoln High School, and neither is retaliation or false accusations." Brad immediately leaned forward, apparently eager to present his version of events first. "Mr. Patterson, this is really just a big misunderstanding. We were having a conversation with Zara, just normal student interaction, and Emma completely overreacted. We weren't doing anything wrong." Chelsea nodded in support. "Exactly. We were just talking, and then Emma came rolling over and started threatening us and recording us without permission. If anyone was being aggressive, it was her." Jake added, "We would never bully anyone. We're good students. Brad's on the football team, Chelsea's in student government, and I'm in the honor society. We don't need to pick on people." Emma felt her anger rising again as she listened to their coordinated lies, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had evidence, she had witnesses, and she had the truth on her side. Mr. Patterson's expression remained neutral, but she could see him taking mental notes of their statements. "Emma," Mr. Patterson said, "I'd like to hear your account of what you observed and what you did." Emma took a breath and organized her thoughts before speaking. She had learned from her history presentation earlier that day that clear, factual communication was more powerful than emotional outbursts. "I was leaving study hall and heading toward the main entrance when I heard voices around the corner near the trophy cases. The tone sounded aggressive, so I stopped to see what was happening." She continued methodically, describing exactly what she had seen. Brad knocking down Zara's backpack, the comments about her clothing and family situation, the deliberate mention of her deceased parents, and the way all three bullies had circled around Zara while she was on the floor collecting her scattered belongings. "When I saw what was happening, I couldn't just walk away," Emma said. "I positioned myself between them and Zara and asked them to stop. Instead of stopping, they started directing their insults towards me, calling me names related to my disability, and implying that I couldn't do anything to help because I use a wheelchair. Mr. Patterson made notes as Emma spoke, and she could see him paying particular attention when she mentioned the specific slurs and comments that had been made. You mentioned that you recorded part of the interaction. Do you still have that recording? Emma nodded and carefully retrieved her phone. I started recording when they refused to stop, and when it became clear they weren't going to listen to reason. I wanted to have evidence of their behavior in case it escalated further. As Emma prepared to show the recording, she noticed Zara shift uncomfortably in her seat. Emma realized that Zara might feel embarrassed about having the incident documented and potentially shared with more people. She made a mental note to talk with Zara privately about how the recording would be used. Before we watched the recording, Mr. Patterson said, I'd like to hear from Zara. Can you tell me what happened from your perspective? This was the moment Emma had been both hoping for and dreading. She hoped that Zara would speak up for herself and provide her own account of the bullying, but she was also concerned that Zara might minimize the situation to avoid further confrontation. Based on her observations of Zara over the years, Emma suspected she was someone who preferred to handle problems quietly rather than making waves. Zara was quiet for a long moment, and Emma could see her weighing her words carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but soft. This wasn't the first time, she said simply. They've been bothering me since the beginning of the school year. Usually, it's just comments about my clothes or my family situation, but today was different. She described the escalation, the way Brad had deliberately knocked her backpack down, and the personal nature of the insults about her parents and grandmother. They broke my calculator, she added, holding up the cracked device. My grandmother saved money from both her jobs to buy this for me. It wasn't expensive, but it was important to us. Emma noticed tears in Zara's eyes as she spoke about her grandmother, and she felt a renewed surge of protective anger toward the three bullies. The fact that they had targeted someone who was clearly dealing with financial struggles and family loss made their behavior even more reprehensible. Patterson's expression had grown increasingly serious as Zara spoke. You said this wasn't the first time. Can you give me some examples of previous incidents? Zara hesitated, and Emma could see her internal struggle. Speaking up about bullying often felt like admitting weakness or inviting retaliation. But with Emma's support and Mr. Patterson's encouraging demeanor, Zara began to describe a pattern of harassment that had been ongoing for months. There had been incidents in the cafeteria where Brad and his friends had made loud comments about the free lunch program while Zara was in line. They had spread rumors about her family's financial situation and had made jokes about her clothing and appearance. They had excluded her from group projects and had made sure she felt isolated and unwelcome in social situations. I usually just ignored it, Zara said. I figured if I didn't react, they'd get bored and move on to someone else. But today felt different. They seemed more determined to get a reaction, and when Emma showed up, they got even more aggressive. Emma was struck by Zara's resilience and her mature approach to handling the situation. She had been dealing with systematic bullying for months without adult intervention, trying to protect herself while maintaining her dignity. It made Emma even more determined to ensure that there were consequences for the bullies' behavior. Brad, Chelsea, and Jake had grown increasingly uncomfortable as Zara spoke, and their earlier confidence had visibly deflated. The detailed, consistent account of ongoing harassment was much harder to dismiss as a misunderstanding or overreaction. Patterson turned to the recording on Emma's phone. Let's see what you captured, Emma. The video was clear, and the audio was sufficient to hear the key parts of the conversation. The recording showed Brad's dismissive attitude when Emma first intervened, Chelsea's mocking comments about Emma's wheelchair, and Jake's half-hearted attempt to de-escalate before Brad became more aggressive. Most damaging was the clear audio of Brad using slurs related to Emma's disability and his statement that she needed to learn to mind her own business. The recording also captured the moment when Brad had tried to grab Emma's phone and her defensive maneuver that had surprised him. As the recording played, Emma watched the faces of the three bullies change from defiant to worried. Miss Garcia shook her head sadly, and Mr. Patterson's jaw tightened with obvious disapproval. The evidence was undeniable, and their earlier claims of innocent conversation had been thoroughly debunked. When the recording ended, the classroom was silent for several moments. Finally, Mr. Bay, Patterson spoke. Based on what I've heard and seen today, I'm going to be recommending suspensions for all three of you, he said, addressing Brad, Chelsea, and Jake. This constitutes harassment, bullying, and disability discrimination. These are serious violations of school policy and potentially violations of federal law. Emma felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief, but she also noticed that Zara seemed uncomfortable with the attention the situation was receiving. She made another mental note to check in with Zara privately, to make sure she felt supported rather than exposed by the formal consequences. Mr. Patterson continued outlining the next steps. Parents would be called, formal reports would be filed, and there would be follow-up meetings with the principal and potentially with district administrators. The 3 bullies would be suspended immediately, and their return to school would be contingent on completing anti-bullying education and agreeing to have no contact with Zara unless required for academic purposes. I also want to address the calculator, Mr. Patterson said, looking at Zara with genuine concern. The school will replace that immediately. Deliberate destruction of another student's property is unacceptable, especially when that property has personal and financial significance. Emma had been planning to offer to replace the calculator herself, but she was pleased that the school was taking responsibility. It sent a clear message that there were real consequences for bullying behavior and that victims would be supported, not just protected from future incidents. As the formal part of the meeting concluded, Emma realized that something significant had shifted in her relationship with Zara. They had been through something intense together, and while they had barely known each other before today, they now shared an experience that had revealed important things about both of their characters. The 30 minutes that had started with Emma witnessing injustice had transformed into a reckoning that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. But more than that, it had marked the beginning of what Emma sensed would be an important friendship and a new chapter in both of their high school experiences. As they prepared to leave Mr. Patterson's classroom, Emma caught Zara's eye once more. This time, the look they shared was one of mutual respect and understanding. They had both found their voices today, and they had both learned something about the power of standing up for what was right, even when it felt scary and uncertain. The real measure of what they had accomplished together would be revealed in the days and weeks to come. 7. The days following the confrontation in the hallway brought changes to Lincoln High School that neither Emma nor Zara had anticipated. Word of what had happened spread through the student body with the rapid efficiency that only high school gossip could achieve. But the story that circulated was different from what either girl had expected. Instead of the usual victim blaming or minimizing that often accompanied bullying incidents, students were talking about Emma's courage in intervening and Zara's quiet strength in finally speaking up. The video recording that Emma had taken, while not shared publicly, had been seen by enough administrators and parents that the details of the incident were well documented and undeniable. By Thursday morning, just 2 days after the incident, Emma noticed a shift in how other students interacted with her. People who had always been polite but distant were now stopping to talk with her in hallways. Several students approached her to share their own experiences with bullying or to thank her for standing up for someone who needed help. "I wish I had been brave enough to do what you did," said Maria Santos, a junior who sat near Emma in biology class. "I've seen those 3 pick on other kids before, and I always just pretended not to notice. I feel terrible about that now." Emma was still processing her own feelings about becoming suddenly visible in ways she had never sought. She had always been content to be known for her academic achievements and positive attitude, but now she found herself in the unexpected role of someone who represented courage and moral action. It was both flattering and overwhelming.
It was both flattering and...
For Zara, the attention was even more complex. Students who had never acknowledged her existence were now greeting her by name and asking how she was doing. Teachers who had respected her work but maintained professional distance were now checking in with her personally and making sure she felt supported in their classes. "I heard about what happened," said Ashley Chen from her chemistry class, approaching Zara during lunch period. "I'm really sorry you had to deal with that, and I'm glad Emma was there to help. I wanted you to know that if you ever want company at lunch or need someone to walk with between classes, I'd be happy to hang out." Zara found herself in the unfamiliar position of having multiple social invitations and offers of friendship. Part of her was grateful for the support, but another part wondered whether this attention would fade once the novelty of the incident wore off. She had learned to be cautious about trusting that people's kindness would be lasting. The most significant change, however, was the friendship that was developing between Emma and Zara themselves. What had started as a moment of intervention had evolved into daily conversations, shared lunches, and a genuine connection that surprised both of them with its natural ease. On Friday afternoon, they sat together in Emma's favorite spot near the Memorial Garden, sharing the lunch that Zara's grandmother had packed with enough food for 2 people. Dorothy Williams had insisted on this once she learned that Emma had stood up for her granddaughter, and she wanted to show her appreciation in the most meaningful way she knew how. "My grandmother wants to meet you," Zara said, unwrapping a sandwich made with homemade bread. She's been talking about you non-stop since Tuesday.
I think she's more excited about me having a friend than she is about the bullies getting suspended.
Emma smiled, touched by the invitation, and curious about the woman who had raised Zara with such strength and dignity.
I'd love to meet her. My mum has been asking about you too.
She wants to invite you and your grandmother over for dinner sometime.
These simple exchanges represented a profound shift for both girls.
Emma had always had friendly relationships with classmates, but she hadn't developed a close friendship with anyone since her accident. The combination of her changed circumstances and her own protective instincts had created barriers that she was only now beginning to recognize and lower. For Zara, the idea of integrating her school life with her home life was revolutionary. She had spent years keeping these worlds separate, partly to protect her grandmother from worry, and partly to avoid the potential judgment or pity that might come with people knowing more about their circumstances.
Can I ask you something?
Emma said, setting down her apple and looking at Zara with genuine curiosity.
Why didn't you ever report what Brad and his friends were doing?
You're clearly strong enough to handle confrontation when you need to. Zara considered the question carefully, as she did most things. I guess I thought it would make things worse, she said finally. When adults get involved in bullying situations, sometimes it just makes the bullies more creative about hiding what they're doing. And I didn't want my grandmother to worry about me. She already sacrifices so much to take care of me.
Emma nodded, understanding the complexity of Zara's reasoning even if she didn't entirely agree with it.
But you spoke up on Tuesday, even before Mr.
Patterson arrived. Something was different that day. You were different that day? Zara replied simply. When I saw you put yourself between them and me, even though you didn't really know me, it made me realize that maybe I was worth defending. And if you were brave enough to stand up for me, maybe I could be brave enough to stand up for myself. This exchange marked a turning point in their friendship. They began to understand how their different experiences and perspectives could complement each other and create something stronger than either of them had possessed alone. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened through shared experiences and mutual support. Emma helped Zara navigate some of the social opportunities that were now available to her, introducing her to study groups and encouraging her to consider joining clubs that matched her interests. Zara, in turn, helped Emma process some of the emotional complexity that came with her newfound visibility as someone who had taken a moral stand. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, Emma confided during one of their after-school conversations. Not about standing up for you, that was absolutely right, but about the recording and the formal consequences. Those 3 students are going to have this on their permanent records, and it might affect their college applications or their future opportunities.
Zara looked at Emma with gentle surprise.
You're worried about the people who were bullying me?
Not worried exactly, Emma clarified.
But I believe people can change, and I hope that what happened serves as a learning experience rather than just a punishment.
I hope they become better people because of this, not just more careful about not getting caught. This conversation revealed something important about Emma's character that Zara deeply respected. Even in the midst of justifiable anger and protective action, Emma maintained empathy for the people who had behaved badly. She wanted justice, but she also wanted redemption and growth. As it turned out, Emma's hopes for positive change were not entirely misplaced. Brad, Chelsea, and Jake all completed their suspensions and their required anti-bullying education. Brad's parents had been particularly shocked by his behavior, and they had enrolled him in counseling to address the attitudes and insecurities that had led to his treatment of other students. When the 3 returned to school, their behavior was markedly different. They kept their distance from both Emma and Zara, as required by the school's agreement, but they also seemed generally less aggressive and more subdued in their interactions with other students. Whether this change was motivated by genuine growth or simply by fear of further consequences, the result was a safer environment for everyone. The incident had also sparked broader conversations about bullying and inclusion at Lincoln High School. Principal Martinez had organized assemblies about bystander intervention and had established new reporting systems that made it easier for students to seek help when they witnessed or experienced harassment. Ms. Garcia had started a lunch program called Open Table, where students who wanted company during lunch could gather in the library conference room. The program was subtle enough to avoid stigmatizing anyone as friendless, but structured enough to ensure that no one had to eat alone unless they chose to. For Emma and Zara, these systemic changes felt like validation that their difficult experience had contributed to something larger and more lasting than just their own resolution. They had not only found friendship with each other, but they had inadvertently sparked improvements that would benefit future students. As the school year progressed, their friendship continued to evolve and deepen. Emma's confidence in her own moral courage led her to run for student government. where she advocated for better accessibility and inclusion policies. Zara's growing comfort with visibility led her to join the debate team, where her analytical skills and thoughtful perspectives made her a formidable competitor. By spring, they were inseparable friends who balanced each other's strengths and supported each other's growth. Emma had learned that her physical limitations didn't define her power to make a difference, and Zara had learned that being visible and vulnerable could lead to connection rather than just exposure. The 30 minutes that had started with bullying and intervention had transformed into a friendship that would last through high school, college, and beyond. They had saved each other in different ways, and they had both discovered versions of themselves that were braver, stronger, and more compassionate than they had known they could be. Years later, when they were both successful in their chosen careers and still close friends, they would look back on that October afternoon as the day they learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be a bystander when someone needs help. They learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear. And they learned that the most meaningful friendships often begin not with comfortable similarities, but with shared moments of choosing what's right over what's easy. The story of Emma Rodriguez and Zara Williams became part of Lincoln High School's culture, passed down through younger students as an example of what it looked like to stand up for others and stand up for yourself. It became a reminder that 30 minutes could change everything, and that sometimes the quiet ones are just waiting for the right moment to show their strength. Their story proved that real-life heroes don't always wear capes or possess superpowers. Sometimes they roll up in wheelchairs or stand up from scattered books on hallway floors. Sometimes they're 17-year-old girls who decide that enough is enough and that everyone deserves dignity, respect, and friendship. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of courage that say, I see you, I believe you matter, and I'm willing to stand with you. Emma and Zara's story became a testament to the truth that we all have the power to be someone else's hero, and at the moment we choose to use that power, we often discover we've been our own hero all along.